Hello, welcome to Director Demolition. On this show, I go through directors' filmographies one by one and simultaneously rank them one by one while giving conductive reviews of said films. Today's subject, Christopher Nolan. One of the most influential and successful directors of the 21st century, one may argue the most successful director of the 21st century. Known for his high concepts, stark tension, and unique audio style, Nolan has captivated himself among the all-time greats when it comes to directing. However, some out there claim Nolan is a fraud, a man who just thinks big but never delivers. Well, ahead of his highly anticipated new film, The Odyssey, I thought I would look at every one of his films one by one and build a natural conclusion on if he can survive. Director Demolition. In last place, and very much in this case, unfortunately least, we have The Dark Knight Rises. So, I have some thoughts about this one. Quite frankly, to get it out of the way, I think this film has so much going on that it has too much going on. There are so many goddamn characters in this film, I think it would be excessive for a 20-episode season of TV. Batman, Bane, Gordon, Alfred, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Anne Hathaway, Matthew Modine, Marion Cotillard, the Mayor, a mob boss, Lucius Fox, Liam Neeson, Ben Mendelsohn, and more just in the first 40 minutes. By the time Juno Temple was introduced, I was genuinely confused by what I was watching. Also, this movie feels like an imitation of Batman, kind of like I'm being lied to that this is a Batman movie. Like, yeah, I'm seeing Batman characters, but it just doesn't feel like Batman. Maybe because Batman is barely in this movie. The stakes here also feel quite off, as nothing really feels very dangerous. I honestly think that's just because there's so much going on, nothing quite gets to stick, which is really unfortunate. Also, Batman's helicopter thing is just too damn ridiculous for the world that they have built up here. I mean, Batman always uses futuristic tech, but this shit would be egregious in a Star Wars movie, let alone a semi-grounded Batman trilogy. In the midst of all this, with such a warped, overdone script, this film somehow manages to just be boring. It's not nearly as interesting as the first two, and honestly, it's so sloppy it really makes you wonder why this was even made. We could have just ended at The Dark Knight if this third film was so reliant on Heath Ledger, apparently. Why did this need to happen? The dialogue is also just a mess in this film. The exposition is painful and shockingly bare bones. I do have some positives, but unfortunately, I don't have much. I really like Bruce and Alfred's dynamic at first. All their scenes with Alfred questioning Bruce's heart, and if he really still has the passion, and how he kind of just doesn't want him to do it because he doesn't think he has it anymore. He's desperate to see Bruce move on and be free in life, is compelling. And then for some reason, Alfred just says bye and leaves the movie until the end. Over a minor disagreement as well, in the grand scheme of things. It just all goes out the window. Also, despite being somewhat undercooked with her screen time, Anne Hathaway is shockingly good as Selena Kyle. She is so damn good in this movie, but unfortunately, they forget about her halfway through. I can't even believe, though, after all of this, that they would add Bane into this movie, because she is the electric spark this film desperately was lacking. It's better when it's playing off of her and Bruce. I would have rather just had this been a Catwoman Bruce story, but I understand you maybe don't want to do a movie where Catwoman is the main villain. I could understand that. But speaking of Bane, I think this may be an unpopular opinion based on, online takeaways, but I really like Tom Hardy's Bane here. It's kind of cartoonish, and it does feel out of place for the movie it is, but it is a very comic-y, unique portrayal for what we've seen from Bane in film, not that that's saying much. I think it adds this weird, corny texture to this otherwise dull film, and that I quite enjoy. But sadly, this movie doesn't really twist. It doesn't really turn. There's no spark here. It kind of just feels like you're watching an old dog live out its final days. I still love the dog, but it's just old and in pain at this point. Seems like it wishes it was dead at this point, and putting it to sleep would honestly be a good thing. Huge disappointment. Now, in 11th place, we have Christopher Nolan's directorial debut from 1998, Following. Now, before I get started, this is a 70-minute, $6,000 budget film that is entirely in black and white, so I can't go too harsh on this because, quite frankly, the fact that for $6,000 you could even get a scene of material, let alone 70 minutes, is pretty remarkable. But to be quite honest, this film is a little bland. It takes a while to get going, but once you're in that third act, it does actually start to play out pretty nicely. Cobb, the character, who is played by Alex Haw, which, as far as I can see, this is his only feature role, which is bizarre because he is fantastic in this. It does have potential, and you can see how Christopher Nolan started here, because it does have a lot of his signature quirks. Like, he loves black and white, as we will see as we go later down this ranking. But this film in particular is completely in black and white, and I don't know if that was stylistic or if it was just a budget thing, but to be quite honest, you can feel the $6,000 budget throughout the whole film. And I would say it hurts it, but I can't say anything hurts it, because the fact it was made is a miracle. And for that, I would suggest you to watch it if it's something you'd be interested in. However, for me personally, it just did not work, but I can't fault it based on what it is. Batman Begins is a tricky one. I really want to like this movie, but something just feels off. The way this movie is presented just doesn't quite work for me. This movie is just off to the races from the go, with no time to let anything really breathe. I don't necessarily hate this style of presentation, but for your first Batman movie, I don't think it works. I also dislike how clean-cut Gotham looks. You're telling me this place is in steep decline and it's this total ghetto, basically, but I'm looking around and I see what seems to be like a pretty nice part of Manhattan. That's just what it looks like to me. Christian Bale does a good job as Batman, but he never quite feels like Bruce Wayne in this film. He just feels like a sad guy with a vengeance fetish when he's not playing Batman. Batman also kills people in this film, even if it's not directly, which I just don't really care for. Kind of just feels against the character's way. I was really digging the scene where he has to kill a man to complete his training. However, he proceeds to say no, set the place on fire, and kill 100 people in the process. But I guess it's not directly? What the fuck? It's also, quite weird at times. And speaking of Scarecrow, he is really undercooked here. Cillian Murphy is giving it his all, but man, I just don't care about his character. Feels like he's in a different movie, to be quite honest with you. Nolan does get some wonderful shots here, and the next film in this trilogy will pay off, trust me, but unfortunately, this just doesn't feel like Batman to me. Even if I'm seeing everything that happens in Batman's stories, it's kind of similar to The Dark Knight Rises in that way. I think my highlight here is honestly Katie Holmes' Rachel Dawes, as all the stuff with her and Bruce really stands out to me, showing two characters with similar moral compasses, but two very different approaches in how they use them. And all that stuff to me is just, to be honest, fascinating. The chase scene with the Batmobile is one of the most sick chase scenes in any sort of Batman film. I also love how campy this feels at times. Tom Wilkinson's Carmine Falcone was not what I was expecting, and I think later portrayals work much better, but honestly, he is so over the top here, I kind of love it. Overall, I wouldn't say this is a failure or anything, but it just doesn't feel right. A lot of the ideas it presents are interesting, there's just not enough juice to let them cook in the specific adaptation.
The Prestige is fine. I really wanted to love this movie, I honestly did, and there are elements I do really enjoy. For instance, the parallel between Borden and Angier and how they interweave between the successful one and the jealous one throughout the movie is really good writing. I love the visuals, I think it's Nolan's most beautiful film, at least up to this point in his career, and the sets and costume design just trap you in this 1800s atmosphere that really adds to the movie's style, I guess you could say. Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman are great, and a really big shout out to Michael Caine, who absolutely soaks into his role. However, I would love to give credit to David Bowie's insane performance as Nikola Tesla. I was not expecting that, but he really kills his role here, and huge shout out because, I mean, that's not easy to do, to play such a complex character when you're not necessarily an actor. However, I do have some issues with this film, some real issues. The jealous madman stuff would be interesting if Borden didn't kill Angier's wife with his stupidity. I think it would be far more fascinating if he did do the knot as planned and the act just went wrong, because then Angier would just have this motive that you agree with, where, oh my gosh, his wife died, that's terrible, but also Borden didn't really mean to do it, so it's vengeance that doesn't really come from anywhere. And with how the movie ends, where it kind of really tells you that Angier is the villain, I just don't understand why they would have Borden actually kill his wife, even if it was by accident. My other big issue is this movie is just too long. By the time we hit the 90-minute mark, it really starts to drag, and it kind of just feels like we're going in circles. To be honest, I just don't think this movie holds the punch it thinks it does. Once again, it's expertly made, but there's just a lot of questionable decisions I have on the writing side. Up next from 2002, we have Insomnia. I don't think it's talked about enough how underrated this movie is. To be honest, when I first watched this movie a couple years ago, I didn't really care for it, but on this rewatch, it is so damn good. Robin Williams absorbs the screen and keeps you on edge every second he's in the film. He brings this strange, boyish charm to such a sick and despicable character, it is so unsettling. Like, I believe this guy truly believes he did nothing wrong, and that is just terrifying as a character. But honestly, it does open a discussion on if he was underutilized in this movie. His character isn't introduced until an hour into the film, and I personally would have liked more of his chilling performance. Al Pacino is also really good here. I can definitely see someone saying he seems bored out of his mind, but his character is literally a guy trying to fall asleep. This film seems to get crazier and crazier the longer he stays awake, and I love little things like that in movies. The plot is progressing with his insomnia. The dynamic here between our leads is especially gripping, showing you a man who made a mistake and a man who thinks he's made a mistake. Hard concept to make work, but honestly, I think Pacino, Williams, and Nolan pull it off. Overall, a very solid entry to such a stellar filmography. Okay, so to be completely honest, I have absolutely no idea what exactly is happening in this movie. I know it's something to do with time and going in reverse, in the future fighting the present in World War III, but if you asked me to piece this all together, I would have no clue. But to be honest, I still really enjoyed this movie. Sure, it's nearly impossible to follow, but I mean, damn was I entertained. Some of my favorite action ever in a Nolan film, and also one of my favorite casts of his, hands down. This is not your typical Nolan cast, and I think it adds so much liveliness and adds to the mystery of what the fuck is going on that almost nobody here is a recycled Nolan actor. Kenneth Branagh, John David Washington, Robert Pattinson, and Elizabeth Debicki are my standouts, with Branagh giving hands down the greatest villain performance in a Nolan film. He is so insanely over the top while also adding a seriously chilling presence when necessary. The film's use of sound design and how well everything meshes together visually, even while in reverse, is incredible. I just really love this world that Nolan has painted, and all the characters are really superb here, which is somewhat unusual for Nolan. Some of the times, Nolan's characters are just centered around his plots, almost like they're placeholders there to guide you through the journey. I think this is one of the few times a cast has outshined the plot in a Christopher Nolan movie. I just don't understand how time works in this movie, and that is the biggest issue. I don't know if I'm not smart enough or what, but I truly do not understand how things appear that haven't happened yet, even while it is used exceptionally at points. I just don't get how. And I'm usually one to overlook plot holes or not care if something is nonsensical. I mean, hell, some of my favorite movies are completely devoid of any logic, but it's hard to do that here because the plot is literally centered around time travel. It also doesn't make sense why it's in reverse. It all just seems inconvenient to Andre to do everything in reverse. I just don't understand. It's a shame because if the script just made a little more sense and gave you a little more information on how everything is happening, it would probably be my favorite Nolan. But unfortunately, it does not.
So, this movie is simply Christopher Nolan flexing his dick. I don't know how else to put it. This is a fine example of what makes a director's style stand out, with such breathtaking sequences and perfect pacing while adding in so much tension. This movie isn't necessarily my favorite Nolan, but it might be his most impressive on a technical feat. It never really occurred to me how perfect Nolan is for war movies, but man, this is really just a great combination between genre and director. The way everything is shot has this tense energy that I genuinely don't understand how one crafts. Like, I don't know if it's the look or the acting or maybe both, but this film just radiates stress. Like, we're also on a timer to do something here. I just am honestly surprised at how much this feels like a capital M movie. Like, it's not doing anything crazy, it's not a absurd concept. I mean, it's a based on true events war film, but yet it still stands out in such an ambitious filmography. Another thing this movie does is show how bad the absolute slop situation that modern war films are in. This movie brings the sauce and brings the heat, and these modern war movies simply do not. Like, imagine watching this and then going to see that Jimmy Stewart World War II biopic. I simply couldn't imagine, because I will not be seeing that shit.
Don't I have the right to serve my country just like anyone else does?
If I had one minor issue with this film, it would be all the Air Force stuff with Tom Hardy. I understand realism, but honestly, it just felt like we were watching the same sequence over and over again after a while. But yeah, I mean, there's not really much to say with this one, especially if you're familiar with the real life events. You probably know what this film is going to be, or at least have a general idea. It's really just an exceptional war movie with superb direction. Okay, so before I get started, I just want to say that these next five films I think are all wonderful movies. Like, they could be flipped around at any point of my life, but today I think in fifth place we have Interstellar. This is a movie. This is the good stuff right here. There are some of the most intense set pieces I have ever seen in my life. The scale and scope of this film is probably one of the most impressive feats of modern cinema, with hands down the greatest sci-fi visuals I have ever seen come out of the 2010s. But it's not the sci-fi elements of this film that really make me love it as much as I do. It's the human ones. This story is heart-wrenching, and I am just unsure of how Christopher Nolan can blend humanity and science together so well, making such complex concepts boiled down to a man's insistence to see his family again. It's the same sort of deal with Inception. I'm just unclear on how he's so good at it. How Nolan blends these familiar cinematic themes with such advanced plots is what separates him from the rest of history, in my opinion. When I went on this journey of watching every Nolan film, I honestly thought I was going to think he was overrated, and not personally for me. But what I did not expect was to think he was underrated and underappreciated in this current moment. He is this modern generation's Kubrick, Spielberg, Hitchcock, and while yes, Nolan is appreciated highly, and I think most people would tell you that, there is this weird undertone from certain people that he's not as good as they say. He isn't as good as they say, simply put. He's better. Interstellar is a masterpiece, simply put. The way Nolan threads this story through its central themes of love and family and selflessness versus selfishness, it's all just unlike anything I've ever seen. Some of these reviews are longer than others because there's so much to say about certain movies and there's all these hot takes and all that, but with Interstellar, I tell you, there isn't really much to say. You kind of just have to see it to believe it. Oh boy, this is a big one. And to be honest, it lives up to the hype. But does that really surprise anyone? I mean, what possibly is there left to say about The Dark Knight? It is one of the finest crime thrillers, superhero movies, Nolan films, all in one, and it still exceeds expectations. Some Nolan films tend to drag, but this movie is just non-stop full throttle. However, it is in a much better way than Batman Begins. Immediately you notice how much better Bruce Wayne is in this movie. I mean, Christian Bale totally jumps into the whole playboy billionaire persona way better than he did in the first film, and I still love his Batman, but I honestly prefer the voice from Begins more.
City just showed you that it's full of people ready to believe in good.
Aaron Eckhart has so much swagger and menace as Harvey Dent, it really is a wonder his career didn't go A-list after this. I mean, any other movie he would have been the show stealer. Speaking of show stealing, I think it's time we get the elephant in the room out of the way, Heath Ledger. I can confidently say this is the best performance in any sort of superhero film, and easily one of the greatest performances ever put to film. He has such a terrifying, gripping presence that always manages to make you forget about everything else when he is on camera. His facial expressions are so unsettling you genuinely get goosebumps simply watching him. It is just unnerving. The way he comes on screen and just everything around him almost dissolves because you don't care about anything other than him is a feeling nearly unmatched in cinema. I could talk about this performance for ages. The quirks, the little moments where he feels offended, the weird underlying humor within the character. I could just go on forever. But what hasn't been said about this performance? The way the story just keeps twisting and turning and adding layer on layer on layer without ever once feeling stupid or overdone. It's honestly just perfection. Another thing I love is how comic-y this movie feels. I've seen people say that this is more of a crime movie than a Batman movie, and I just don't get that. It's got so much quirkiness, I was really surprised. I mean, everyone knows this is a masterpiece, but if you somehow avoided it for this long like I did, go watch it now. It's worth every second of your time. Memento is memorable. The whole film keeps you engaged from point A to point B, unraveling a mystery in an extremely unusual way, yet it pays off so well. The way this film is formatted and how we see a scene play out and then learn the context behind it right after just keeps you engaged throughout the entire movie. The concept here of a man who can't form new memories trying to solve his wife's murder is so good. It's such a crowd-pleasing concept, and then it flips it all on its head. Nolan can kind of sometimes get wrapped up in his own writing, but this is one of the few times where I think his absurd writing style works perfectly. It's up there for his most impressive script for me. It's such an interesting dive into how humans cope with trauma, yet it's so absorbing. I'd also love to give a huge shout out to Guy Pearce here, as his performance in this film is next level. So much of this movie relies on his acting and how he sells this character, and it's just such a lively performance that's as chopped up as the film itself. Between the acting and the direction and the concept here, this is one of personally the most fun movies I think I've ever seen, which is so weird to say because it is dark as hell. It has such a dark concept, but it's told in such a insane way that really just keeps you kind of kicking your feet at what's going to happen next. Lovely stuff. This film is where I think Christopher Nolan really defined his style. The imagination, complexity, intelligence. This film is really where I think Christopher Nolan became Christopher Nolan. I know how crazy that sounds. He already had a billion-dollar movie before this was made. He had the biggest stars taking any roles in his films. I mean, it sounds crazy, but I think this was the start of the legend Christopher Nolan. This was the film he made when he was allowed to pretty much do whatever he wanted. And you see this kind of style particularly bleed into everything past this. I absolutely love the scale of this movie and how many different locations you see in this film. It keeps what would be boring exposition lively and engaging. As a kid, I actually used to hate this film and I found it deathly boring, but now that I'm old enough to make sense of it, I think it's a pretty damn good movie. This is the type of film I wish we saw more of in modern Hollywood, focused on creativity and vision rather than product and marketability. I could definitely understand one's thinking that this is too convoluted and there's just too much explaining and not enough doing, but I think this movie uses its time wisely. It fits in telling you so much of this complex story while never managing to quite steer into straight up boredom. I think by this point Nolan has just mastered pacing, to be quite honest. It's always a strong suit of his. He tends to have an unconventional style of pacing where you never quite stop while also giving you plenty of time to breathe. I'm not sure how he does it, and I think this film is one of his best examples of it. I also love how this absurdly complex concept just kind of boils down to a complicated heist film. I just love shit like that. I think the best films are the ones that take relatively simple ideas or formulaic story structures and carve uniqueness out of them. And this is a great example of that. As far as performances go, I think everyone here is outstanding. I think Ken Watanabe is excellent as this somewhat menacing, somewhat friendly guy who you don't exactly know, but for some reason you trust him. Kind of like a dream. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is great as usual. Not much I can say there that hasn't been said. I think he's one of the best talents of his generation. But to be honest, my standouts here are Leo and Elliot Page. Elliot Page's character is such a burst of energy here, adding this childlike wonder to such a serious story. Even while maintaining tension, Page manages to match the tone while bleeding in some real energy to the movie, as we kind of learn the world of architects with them. Leo, however, is just stunning in this movie. Every scene he's in, he steals the show, and I really think that this is up there for the best performance in a Christopher Nolan film. Every scene he's in, he steals the show, and I really think that this is up there for the best leading performance in a Nolan film, which is funny because I don't think it would personally rank in my top 5 Leo performances. I'm not quite sure what it is with his performance, but every time he's on screen, I just kind of sit up in my chair like that one meme. Overall, I think this movie is genuinely a blast and sits among the top of Nolan's discography for me. I can't believe I used to hate this movie, man. Now it's one of my all-time favorites. Fine, I'll say it. Oppenheimer is Christopher Nolan's best film. Oppenheimer is hands down the greatest movie of Christopher Nolan's career up to this point, and to be honest, I don't think it's being beaten anytime soon. This is a film that will change your day. I don't care what you're doing, where you are, if you sit down and you watch this, it will completely change your mood. It is bleak, tense, terrifying, enthralling, electric, scary, all in one film, and I said about Tenet that the acting outshines the story, but this is the rare instance where the acting meets the story in a Nolan film. Cillian Murphy is so goddamn good as J. Robert Oppenheimer, because he's not exactly playing a good guy here. I mean, Oppenheimer attempts to kill his professor 5 minutes into the movie because he's not nice to him after he failed his experiment. And then he goes on to create the atomic bomb. Yeah, he's not a great guy, to be honest, but it's the performance that makes this film so undeniable. His performance somehow matches the tone of the movie. That's actually a strange thing about Nolan films, where his leading men don't really have much to them and they're kind of just in the story of the film. And obviously with a biopic you'd expect otherwise, But man, this is still so surprising how good Oppenheimer is written in this movie. The performance is as sad as the film is, matching this overlying uh-oh feeling the entire thing leaves you with. Just this dread of knowing what's next without saying it. And you know what's nuts? I don't even know if Cillian Murphy is the best part of this movie. Robert Downey Jr. is an actor. He's in a lot of things. You may know him from Iron Man or Doolittle. He's not in anything like Oppenheimer, though. This fucking performance. A lot of people wondered why Robert Downey Jr. went back to the MCU after getting his Oscar for this. And I mean, can you blame him? You will never do better than this. This is the best it gets. You got your Oscar, your all-time performance, fuck off to the land of Marvel and sit in some green screens for a couple of days and take your 100 millions and fuck off into the sunset. This is one of the best performances in cinematic history. The smug, arrogant jealousy he radiates while confidently making you think he believes his bullshit is just, wow. It is hands down the most realistic portrayal of a politician I have ever seen in a movie. There is no cartoonish agenda, there is no over-the-top killing spree, just pure human evil on the screen in a way I don't think I've ever seen before. I also love how Nolan manages to sneak in his signature black and white here. I mean, obviously it has a purpose, but man, I just love his commitment to his style and what he thinks is cool. It's just so lovely in this modern era of slop. This is also probably the most gliding 3 hours you'll ever spend watching a movie, as the film flies by while showing you so much and leaving you so much to sit with. There is one more thing about this movie I'd like to talk about. In a filmography that provides probably the best pacing a mainstream blockbuster-heavy director can offer, this is easily his best feat. And that's saying something. This is a movie about chemistry, fusion and fission, quantum physics, and once again, with all these topics that general audiences, at least in the West, certainly aren't educated on, Nolan somehow makes it work. There are so many performances I could mention. There are so many scenes I could point out. I mean, hell, the speech Oppenheimer gives after testing the bomb deserves a deep dive itself. So please watch this movie. I know it's long. I know it may sound pretentious based on the subject matter. I understand you may think that it's glorifying a horrific human, but man, please just watch it. You'll never look back again. Overall, I think it is extremely fair to say Christopher Nolan is indeed one of the all-time greats, and this little deep dive I've sent myself down has been a total blast, even if there were a few bumps in the road. I just think it's crazy that there's actual people who think this guy doesn't have it. I mean, honestly, I think it's just an absurd assumption to make. Not only have I found films I will talk about for ages during this watch, my rewatch of Oppenheimer solidified it as one of my all-time favorites. Christopher Nolan has cemented himself on the Mount Rushmore of film directors, and this Odyssey, pun intended, has confirmed that in my opinion. Overall, Christopher Nolan most definitely has survived this episode of Director Demolition.